Welcome to Blackbird Writers, where we interview authors of all things crime related. Today we have Kerry Cathers from Canada. She is a researcher and freelance writer and editor. Recently, she's an attempter of fiction. Her interest in history started when she was in single digits and was inherited from her father. She studied the subject both in Canada and England. Today, she runs the resource site, A Curiosity of Crime, and has recently published her first book, A Writer's Guide to 19th-Century Murder by Arsenic. Get it out of the sun there. The first in what hopefully will become a research series. Welcome, Kerry. And I keep telling everybody from Canada, because I'm so thrilled to have an international writer on our site.
Yay!
So, A Writer's Guide to 19th-Century Murder by Arsenic. It's very specific.
Yes.
How did you get to the point where you were writing this book? What led you there?
Well, it was always an idea with the site, because the website came first, but to produce something, because there's really not much out there that's together for individuals who are writing historical fiction. It's all just kind of spread. So to get the information you need, you've got to read lots and lots of pages. And I came up with the Arsenic because I'd cast my net wide just to see what was out there, build up my own background knowledge. And arsenic I don't want to say, well, it's pretty as much unique. You can't separate the 1800s from arsenic. It was integral. It was everywhere. There was the fear of it. It was in the thoughts. It was in their homes, their farms, their medicine cabinets. And we don't see that in the century before or in the 1900s. So it came to me after reading the book by James Wharton, Arsenic Century, and he very much brought in that theme. And it's true that the 1800s is the century of arsenic.
Do you think that authors who are writing like in the 21st century can use arsenic, or is it like so?
It's a little bit more too innocuous. It's not as innocuous in the 1800s, because if you go into somebody's house today and someone has died of suspected arsenic, and you walk into their cupboard or their closet and you see arsenic, it's like, where did you get that and why do you have it? But in the 1800s, it was like, oh, they got arsenic in the kitchen. Oh, there's Fowler's solution arsenic on their bedside. There's arsenic. It was everywhere. So it's not suspicious having it. So it's a little bit more difficult today because it's so regulated.
So we can't like soak our fly papers.
No. Well, I think I'm not even certain if there's some left, but no, there would be. Well, now my devious brain is working. If you could hide the possession of the fly papers.
Fly papers.
No, I'm encouraging
something different now.
Yeah, it would have to be. And I'm not certain whether there are fly papers left type things. So
in grandma's garage.
Yes, yeah.
You have to be very clever about how to go about it. Well, I love that, writers, you no longer have to spend 30 days on the internet. Because I know that when I come up with a way of killing somebody, I am, I don't even know the questions to ask. And then I am researching it. I'm like, okay, can I trust this site? And then you get off of it and then you're like, oh, I never thought about where they were going to get it or all that kind of thing. And everything is in this book. It is such a cool resource. One of the things that you talked about was people getting away with it.
Yes.
Even though people kind of knew, people getting away with arsenic.
Yeah.
And how did they do that?
And that was one of the, I think when people say, what's the most surprising thing? It's just how many individuals got away with it when people were suspicious or people knew. And especially in England, in the United States, it was a little bit different because the coroner system and the coroner's jury was set up a little bit differently. But in England, it was paid by the parish. And the government didn't really, give much money to their budget. And it was the justice of the peace. So the coroner had to go to him to get the money. And if he was like, well, we're running out, no, it's, we're not going to give you the money to do it. We have cases where individuals are arguing who will pay for the toxicology.
Oh, no.
And so if they can't agree, because sometimes the family would be expected to pay for it and the autopsy. And if they didn't want to pay for it, then they didn't. We've got one example of a doctor who, went to the coroner, absolutely adamant, I know it's arsenic, it's totally arsenic, this person was murdered. The coroner came back and said, we don't have any money, we're not going to fund it.
wow.
So if you want to do it, you're going to have to pay for the toxicology yourself. And he went back to the cause of death and went, oh, sorry, no, death by misadventure. So
Oh, no.
it's like, I'm not going to pay
You just
for
had
it.
to pick a poor place. You got to check out the finances of the government and then take your victim there.
And we have Richard Bell, who killed at least close to 20 people, and they knew he was doing it, but they sat back and thought, well, he's only killing off his relatives, so he's not really a danger to society. So we're not going, there's no point us investigating it. We're better places for our money. Yeah.
As a writer, this is gold. This is gold.
Yeah.
And one thing that I love that you do it in the book, and if you get the book, you will see there's these darker areas, and it's what this means for your story. Now, why did you include that? Why did you go that far?
It's a bit because I'm coming at it from for a writer's perspective, and it's sometimes when you bring together a whole bunch of facts and a collection of facts, it's how do these fit in? How would this work in fiction? How can I play with it? So I thought, why not just throw in a section and saying, I've gone through this. I've read a number of the cases. I've read the science of it. Here's where it all fits together. And here's, the implications of it, so that you're not trying to save the writer a bit of a step. So you're not trying to figure out, what do I do with this, pile of 10 pages of research? How can I tweak the facts to fit the fiction? And
when you're talking about coroners, you actually went farther, and you had like scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3 on what your sleuth could do if the coroner refuses to hold an inquest. So you actually go further and into how your sleuth in that time would behave. Where did you find that information?
That was we've going through and reading with like a number of the cases. So a lot of the research will give you a few points and then go through take you through each of the murder or the famous murder cases. So it's a little bit with that, like seeing how the coroners reacted, but also doing a little bit of external and outside research on how coroners operated, and just how much power they had to decide. And this is true with the States as with England, and also with Europe. Now there were magistrates in Europe of various titles, but unless that individual said yes, there is a crime, then nothing occurs. So it's to place it in context, because I found out about it after doing a little bit of research and saw how it placed, but it's just, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, and who has control of it, because it's
which is really going to make people's writing authentic. And I had come up with a situation where somebody could have been killed with arsenic for a contemporary book, and I'm telling you, you have that section where you go over all of the symptoms, and because I was trying to research, and I'm like, well, what would it look like, and how long would it take, and how much would it take, and all that, and you got all that right there. Which leads me to another question. I always go back to Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie worked in a chemist, I guess that's what they called them at the time, a chemist, like a pharmacy, or something like that, in a hospital, putting together drugs. And that's why she was so accurate, as she was actually handling them. But I always think of like strychnine. I always think of strychnine as a way to poison people. Are you going to like give other, poisons the attention you gave arsenic?
Yeah, because the second book is actually on poisons. Currently, I've identified about 20 poisons that were used and appear in court cases in the 1800s. We'll see how much research and information is on there, because one of the aspects of poison and why some of them might be taken out is if you get too creative, especially in the 1800s, they won't be able to prove it. And that's one of the big elements. So they've got to have, some of the symptoms aren't distinct enough that they would point to them and say, aha, I don't think that's a natural death. And in the 1800s, people just dropped dead from everything and anything. There's, the food hygiene, the water hygiene, everything was just so poor. So that will decide what stays in or not. But yes, there will be strychnine, there will be foxglove, there will be cyanide. There'll also be, I'm looking at it and I'm hoping there's going to be enough, poison through gas, because everybody had the gas lighting and you can actually manipulate with that. And
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What's wrong with us that we think that's exciting?
Yeah, I know this is, and I find that when I'm reading it, it's like, this is so interesting. Oh my, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, you think you think like a researcher, but you also approach these things like a writer and the needs of a writer. Are you planning on writing a crime novel?
Well, I've got a historical fiction. I don't know that I would be able to write a crime novel because I think I would be far too obvious with the clues. And I think probably by about page 20, everybody would know who did it. So I've got a historical
that every author thinks they're obvious. Every time I write a book, I'm like, well, this is just dumb because everybody's good. And then I've had people say, well, I could never figure out who it was. I was like, no, I think because we know it, we think it's more obvious than it is.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm horrible at solving crimes in fiction. Like I'm just, yeah.
But you're writing a historical fiction.
Yes.
And I know that I have read pages of, I think it was a fantasy that you wrote. So you are going to be pursuing fiction too. Correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Going to trying my hand at fiction. So and the one that I'm working on, I think it's coming through to completion. It's the one that I've focused on a bit more because as I'm doing research for other things, it's like, I can include that. Oh, there's a good idea for. And I think that's where it's come through with the book, because even when I was doing my degrees, when I read something, and even when I was reading, because I'm a history dork. So I will read history books and I'm reading and thinking that would be a great setting that would be a great scenario for fiction. That would be a great story. That would be so I think that's why this one has been churned out a little bit more, is because that's the world I'm in at the moment. But
oh, wonderful. Yeah. I love it all. And when you had made a comment, so I did some research. There is available, and I'm sure there's way more, an Ela of Salisbury medieval mystery, the Oxford medieval mysteries, the Gareth and Gwen medieval mysteries, the Crispin Guest mysteries, which I'm pretty darn sure are medieval. He's a knight. I understand you're a bit of an expert on medieval weapons. Is that going to be one of your future books?
It might be. I find it, yeah, probably. But I think probably all that knowledge that I have of the Middle Ages will move into my fantasy, because I know it's one of those where it's very difficult for me to watch shows or read books set in the Middle Ages, because I'm picking it apart and it's like, no, they wouldn't, or no, they wouldn't. So I think it will move into the fantasy, because that gives me a little bit more room to play with things. But yeah, 2 of my degrees are in medieval warfare. And of course, a big part of that is the weaponry. And, always fascinated with how, because it's technology and it's society. So it's, we see the level of technology impacting the weapons that were used, which therefore impacted the war, the way that battles were fought and the warfare. And then as you see technology change, you see it seeping into the military, where you see it seeping then again into how battles were carried out. So that is a fascinating part to me. Like, what is the mechanics of it? How is it done? Where does it fit in society? And questions like, going into battle. Like, that's, I volunteering to, yeah, sure. Hey, I'll go. Yeah, why not? It's like, what's the motivations? Where does it fit in society? So it's, but yeah, I do sit and I have made comments about the show Vikings, about, they're set in one era and they have trilobate swords or pummels. And it's like, no. So my friends won't watch shows like that with me.
You should be a television advisor, a show advisor for these things. When you said that you kind of couldn't stand watching things that weren't correct on the shows, it reminded me of one of the benefits I considered a benefit of a Curiosity of Crimes newsletter, is you have a pet peeve section. And just to give writers kind of a preview, the last one was falling through ice. Can you explain that one?
It's one of the ones, like I grew up in Northern Ontario where, we would regularly get 40 degrees or minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And so, you would have ice. And, what I'll always, I think the element of it is they'll fall through, they'll come back up, and then they'll start walking a great distance or a long distance, in wet clothing, and or they'll punch their way back through the ice, and it's like, no, you can't do that. So, it's that kind of the realism, like someone who has been in the cold, someone who's gotten a soaker in the cold, that you don't last very long. So it's just one of those where if you're portraying it, and especially if you're not in an area where there's a lot of snow or where it hits minus 40, here's how the body reacts. Here's what you have to do. Here's how quickly your characters are going to die if they go through.
Oh my gosh, are you going to write, please, please, please? Like even just a little pamphlet on things you see in television crime shows that are so wrong that that writers can get, and then like an aspiring like television writers and stuff, so they can like check it out before they like put it in their script. That would be so cool.
Well, I was thinking of like one of the little books is just like 100 things you need to know, or 50 things or 10 things or something that you need to know. So it's there where it's
not to do in your story or your script.
Yeah, because I have written a couple of, I've written a couple of books. Copy. Yeah. Because there are, and again, it's one of the things I'm very much where, you have to experience stuff. And if you haven't experienced things, and sometimes you can only know from experience, like darkness is another the element where, especially in television and movies, there's always a little bit of light. But, especially if you're doing historical fiction, when the lights go out, if there's no full moon, you're seeing nothing type thing. So it's just little hints like that about, where you almost, where you have to be there and have to see it to actually, because TV and movies, I think, are getting more unrealistic.
Yeah, probably. My husband watches the Vikings, and it's too violent for me. I will go, okay, that's gross. That's okay. I'm leaving. but he loves history too. So he would love to know what's accurate and what's not, even if he's not going to write a book.
And I will say to anyone who is writing a battle piece, there is absolutely no representation of an accurate battle, whether it be 1800s or medieval or Renaissance, anywhere in any movie, in any television show.
Really?
Nothing accurate whatsoever. No. Yeah.
You mean?
And one of the aspects is because there a lot of them are dealing with the stereotypes, like the barbarians in, skins lining up and running at you. And battles are boring. When you're trying, there's no, like if you're the person who's standing on the front line, yes, there's the fear, there's the aspect of it. But if you're looking from a higher position, because it's slight movements this way and you fire, and then slight movements that way and you fire and you hold your position. And then, so they're better when they're in writing, because then you can get into the head of the person who's experiencing it. But for television and movies, they're quite boring.
Oh, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I noticed all those where when they're showing like Revolutionary War type stuff, where the British are getting wiped out because they're stepping and kneeling, and then the Americans who've been like trained by the Indians are jumping all over them. And I don't know if that's accurate.
And it's a lot. I think they make it a little bit more chaotic.
Yeah.
Than what you would have as a real battle, and especially the further away, or the further you move into technology, like guns, everything has to be set, because if you do something you're not supposed to do, you can get the person beside you killed type thing. So they make them a little bit more chaotic, because it's really, if you've got like a battle, and let's say it's Waterloo, and you've got your square of infantry, and all they're doing is fire, load, it gets kind of boring very quickly.
Yes, usually. Yeah, I would. We've got the 1 hour battle scene in our movie.
And that's all they're doing. Yeah.
Well, excuse me. Aside from writing, you give presentations through various organizations like Romance Writers of America's Kiss of Death and other writing organizations. Now, which do you find more difficult, public speaking or writing, or which do you prefer?
I find the writing more difficult. Like, it's because it's sitting down, and it's, especially with research, it's taking something very big and trying to whittle it down to its core. Public speaking doesn't bother me because I had a baptism of fire after my first year when I was doing my doctorate. I went to the Leeds International Conference.
Oh.
And was giving a paper. No, I was part-time during that year. So my boss would only give me the one day off. So I didn't go to the first day. I was presenting the second day. Each year has a theme, and that year's theme was warfare. My paper was on warfare. So I went in the morning, I sat in the first talk. There were about 10 people there when someone else was giving a paper. And I thought, this is okay, fine, 10 people. I can do this. So mine was the first after lunch. I walk into there, and it's a huge auditorium. And I'm thinking, this is a large place for 10 people.
Oh,
and
no.
I sat, and they came in, and they kept coming in, and at this point, I didn't realize that the theme was warfare. So there were about 300 to 400 people in the room, and there were all the military historians from the States, from Canada, from Europe, from England. So I sat, because they had 3 chairs for the speakers, because the 3 of us getting papers, and I sat there, and I was right in front of the door, and I thought, and I was ready to be sick, and I thought, well, I have 2 choices. One, I ran track in high school. If I sprint for it, they'll never catch me. Or 2, I just sit back and go, screw it, let's go and give the paper. And so I went up, I gave the paper, and it went fine. And if anybody has ever been in a collection of academics, they are the only crowd or the only audience that will try to pick you apart. So I thought after that, it's like, I'm with, 300, 400 academics. Nobody did anything wrong. Nobody came at me. They asked questions. If I can do that, nothing else. So it was a baptism.
Wow. That would have been terrifying.
Oh, it was.
Knowing that there were, experts and historians and stuff that it wasn't just a bunch of goofy college kids that you could snow if you needed to.
It was all of the experts. And I'm someone, as you probably can tell, I talk with my hands, and it's the only time I stood and I gripped the podium and my knuckles were white because it was fear.
Oh my gosh. And so nothing's been phasing you ever since.
After that, it's like, doesn't faze me. Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. Do you have anything lined up with any of the crime organizations? Anything like that's set in stone?
I've got
waiting.
yeah. I've got 2 more with the Kiss of Death. One in February on 19th-century weaponry, and one in March on poisons. And I'm doing forensics and fictions for both the Southeastern Crime Writers of America and the Chicago chapter of the Sisters in Crime. So I've got those ones.
Oh, wonderful. Do you have these on your website?
I have to put a couple up because they've just been confirmed within the last week or so. So I'll be
able to find where you're showing up online and in person. Oh my gosh, because I remember I attended one of your talks, and I think it was for Kiss of Death. And by the end of it, everybody there including me, wanted to write historical fiction. Because you made it fun.
And I think, for me is a couple of people have said, you've given me an idea for this, or I've got an idea. And for me, that's a greater compliment than, to say I learned a lot is like, okay, great, I'm getting the right information out there. But when they come back and they say, I actually got an idea for a murder, or I got an idea for that, that for me is rewarding, because that's a lot of why I'm doing things is, here's what's out there. Now, can I present it to you in a way that you can play with it or get an idea from it? So.
Yes, you definitely hit that chord with a lot of us. I'm wondering, as you get into your own fiction, are you going to have a separate website for that, or?
I think so, because I think I'm probably going to write it under a pen name. But if I go traditionally published, I might not have that option. So, but yeah, I think so, just to keep everything separate so that, the fiction is here, and then, so anyone who is going in with questions or wants resources, that's the site completely dedicated to that, and then something else with the fiction.
Okay. Well, I want to give a shout out to both the website, which is acuriosityofcrime.com.
Correct, yes.
And when you get there, sign up for her excellent newsletter, because you always, I mean, you're funny and you always have fascinating facts. And then I love the pet peeves. So
it's my therapy.
So definitely go and check Kerry out. One last question. So what is next? Because you've got so many projects in the.
Yeah, I'm finishing off the fiction. For the Curiosity of Crime is the poisons. I've got about 4 done, so it's a bit more research, bringing things together. But hopefully, and this might be naive or too hopeful of me, but by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, have like a forensic Bible, where it's bringing together, what we know about ballistics, what we know about hair and fibers, what we know, and also just, how the police and how the investigations can go. And this is one of the another thing which surprised me is, how to, when you stand at the edge of, in 19th century, when you stand at the edge of a crime scene, how would your character process it? So, ideas in that way, so that it's, you've got like a Bible to look at and to see.
Oh, a writer's best friend, Kerry Cathers. Don't forget to check the website, acuriosityofcrime.com. And thank you for coming to Blackbird Writers, Kerry. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
And we'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
With your next book.
Yeah.